Hey guys, this is Pedro back with another interview, this time covering Media Day for VCT Americas Stage 1. My guest at this time is none other than Leaf of G2 Esports, coming off of their appearance in Masters Bangkok, where they finished runners-up, to then move on to this set competition, looking to continue the momentum in this region. So Leaf, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity for another interview. And this time we're looking at a pretty interesting dynamic within this G2 squad, competing in Masters, finishing off in runners up, and just having the need to just surpass that mark in this split. So first question though is, how have you kind of been looking at the period, the break from Bangkok up until now?
Um, I mean, just been treating it as recovery. I mean, long, not very long, but long tournament, a lot of games, a lot of stress, um, long flight, all of that. I mean, I was sick last week, but I'm better now. So it's just been recovery.
Yeah, and of course, and obviously, like I want to ask you to sort of what it was in Masters Bangkok. Obviously, the team had plenty of expectations to do well. You guys did that, but unfortunately, you guys weren't able to win the event, losing to T1 in the grand finals. I look back onto that press conference that you guys had immediately after the result, and obviously, like it was pretty short, but understandable at the same time. And so, I mean, just looking at that result in particular, how do you kind of look back on that, and how difficult it was to take down a team like T1 when they were firing on all cylinders, particularly in those final set of maps?
Um, yeah, I mean, looking back, like there's just a lot of like silly things that we did and I did and stuff like that. Like, and it was very mentally taxing. Like, period. Um, I got sick in Thailand too, so it's like I've just been sick for the past like 2.5 weeks. So it's been stressful. In terms of like the final and like T1 and stuff like that, like I think playing a team like that, like for the first time is definitely a little bit overwhelming. Not overwhelming, but just like hard because they played just such a different style, different comps than we've seen. And like I think that's kind of comparable to us too, because we played, some of these chamber comps that they've never seen and stuff like that. And our comps with the breach tail, like some people aren't even playing that yet. So um it was definitely very hard, very fun game, like just in general, like just to play like with the crowd and the pressure and stuff like that. But yeah, it was hard and it just felt like um it actually felt like a true like challenge.
Hmm. I mean, if you can kind of like sum it up in a few sentences, how would you describe T1 as a team, going off of what you said right there in your most recent answer? If you can kind of summarize them and how they play and the comps that they were using, how would you kind of summarize them?
They just play very pressuring, just very reactive, like very feeling based, where it's like they kind of just have the free will to go for their plays if they want to. Like there's some their comps kind of allow that with some of their agents, and they were hitting like on all strides like that tournament. So they had individual performances from literally everybody. So yeah, it just felt very pressuring and just felt very yeah, just very pressuring. Like nobody really plays like that truly.
And even so, despite having to like go through plenty of circumstances on your end, you were able to help this team perform pretty well in Thailand. And still sticking on to that kind of topic, what do you feel has been the biggest takeaway for you, in particularly that you feel you're gonna be putting that to use, for stage one? Is it like just kind of understanding of the meta? Do you feel like it's something that you can like a trait to your game that you kind of refine further in Thailand that you want to use again in LA? What do you feel? What do you think?
Um, in terms of like in-game stuff, like I don't know too much. Like we have map swaps and like the meta change, so we're just gonna have to see how that kind of plays. Like we know that how we played is good, and in the finals we just messed up. So it's like main thing is like not overthinking it in terms of in-game stuff and just making sure we fix what we need to fix and just refine what we already know is good. and making sure we keep it up. A lot of like Thailand is just for me was just like mental stuff and like at that finish line, just making sure that like I have like enough gas in the tank in order to kind of like push myself over and making sure that like I'm in a good space. And yeah, just like that stuff isn't too applicable to like stage one because LA is obviously way different. Like, I'm in a place that is basically home and stuff like that. But that's just kind of what I learned from Thailand and just like international events over the years.
I mean, I understand that there's been plenty of talk and deserved talk about how this G2 core, guard core, all that stuff has been able to progress and gradually grow from their humble beginnings in early 2022 and having to go from that to here. Now, multiple time international tournament appearance maker, domestic winner, all that stuff. But the same can be said about you, just you being a part of that because I remember like you have been in C9 for a good while, appearing in champions and all that stuff, and then having to also contend at the top of the region. And it's only like this year in which people now have been kind of looking at your performance, well, including end of last year, about looking at your performance as being seen as one of the best players in this region. And so, what I want to ask you, Leaf, is you mentioned about mental. What exactly have you been focusing on, within that set time frame that I mentioned that helped you not just sort of perform well, but also perform well while having a pretty stable mind, if that's the appropriate way to say it?
Um, I mean, regionally, it's like I said, like it's always way easier because you just are in, you're in the same time zone as your friends and like your family and stuff like that. But it's always like a struggle, I think, for anybody when they're just away from home and stuff like that. And it kind of takes a mental toll on it that people don't really, I mean, people realize it, but I think it's a lot more apparent than people think. And like, obviously, people can have their opinions of like, if that, like, oh, just suck it up and stuff like that. But it is like a real thing, especially when you're competing and you're competing for, you know, months on end and stuff like that. So, that's one thing, like in terms of regional versus like international. But in terms of performance, I mean, I have a lot of fun playing with these people, and like whenever I'm having fun and whenever I'm comfortable, like that's when I play my best. So just making sure that like I figure out how to do that in as many games as possible is like kind of the goal for me. And like aside from like, the in-game stuff, like making sure that I'm doing my job and I'm not making mistakes that are, easily avoidable and stuff like that. Like that's all like different, but just making sure that, like I'm in the right headspace to not make those mistakes and not let it, kind of affect me in a negative way is like the big thing for me in terms of performance.
As we now look over into the start of stage one, we're obviously looking into the group that you guys are in, and I would say like when the draw was made for this upcoming split, I would say like it's gonna be pretty hard to to emerge out of this. But this is G2 we're talking about, so the expectation I would assume, and I'm sure that you guys have been carrying with, is that you guys can continue this momentum through group stage, qualifying for playoffs, qualifying for Masters, all that stuff. Nevertheless, what I want to ask you sort of, how do you look at the road ahead with the likes of MIBR, Leviathan Energy, Furia, and Cloud9 in your upcoming schedule? And also on top of that, with this upcoming Masters being set in North America, in Toronto for the first time ever, I believe, in VCT history in North America. Um, how different is it for you guys to just have that motivation to qualify with this in this occasion happening in technically home soil because it's in Canada, but you're from the US. So
Yeah. Um, I mean, our group, like, I think both are pretty evenly matched. Like, I don't think people obviously like overrate, underrate teams all the time. It's a common thing. But I mean, there's definitely very good individual players and individual teams in our group, and there's a lot of changes being made. MIBR made a change, NRG made a change, Lev made a change. I think Furia made a change, but I think that's like because of health issues. So everybody's making changes. C9's like the only team that really hasn't, and that's just because they need more time. But we're always confident. We've played against these people, time in, time out. Um, like there's nothing really too pressuring about most of these teams. We have like the strongest foundation of any team, in my opinion, and we're prepared for like all of these teams. Like we've played, like I said, like we've played against these players and we've played against these teams so much that it's like it just becomes kind of like clockwork, and there's not too much that people can really throw at us. Even with the meta swap and stuff like that, like I don't think there's too much to be surprised about. And yeah, I mean, in terms of Toronto, like I mean, there was champs in LA, but yeah, like a first time Masters in North America. I mean, it's definitely very cool. I think it'd be. I've never been to Canada, but I think everybody wants to qualify to that just because of the fact that like qualifying to like a home like you don't have to fly 14 hours is always an advantage. Like the last 3 tournaments that we've been to have all been in Asia in some form, Shanghai, Korea, and Thailand. And it's like even just even if we have to fly, 5 hours, like that's not comparable like to, changing time zones by 15 hours and stuff like that. So it's like that stuff is kind of like underrated, and I think that it's definitely a big like motivator because we know like if we get there, like we're in a big advantage just inherently because we don't have to adjust to anything.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys are able to appear in Masters Toronto in due time. And so the voices in my head are telling me to wrap up, so I'm gonna have to do that right now. Leaf, thank you so much for the conversation, another interview. Best of luck goes to yourself and the rest of the team for stage one, man.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, man. Have a good rest of your day.